Hey guys, in today's video, I bring you a chilling story that will change your outlook on life and the future. Let's meet Marlo Draven, a woman who faced death during a family picnic and came back with devastating revelations. On the other side, she met Jesus, saw breathtaking cosmic scenarios and discovered shocking truths about the new president and the destiny of humanity. What she experienced will leave you speechless. So, before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Now, get ready for this exciting and revealing journey. The day dawned with the kind of perfect weather that seemed tailor-made for a family picnic. The sky was a crystal blue, and the smell of dry leaves in the air indicated that autumn was in full swing. I had hesitated to go. Late work and the pile of books on the bedside beckoned me, but Chloe, my 8-year-old niece, insisted, "Please, Aunt Marlo, it'll be fun." She was right, of course. I needed a rest. In the Blue Ridge Mountains, we chose a clearing next to a trail to set up a picnic. Emilia, my older sister, was in charge of the sandwiches, while Chloe ran around, collecting vibrantly colored leaves. My parents, sitting in folding chairs, laughed at an inside joke that I couldn't hear from where I was. Everything seemed so normal. Little did I know that in just a few hours my life would change forever. "Let's run, Aunt Marlo." Chloe pulled my hand. "I bet I can get down there before you." She pointed to a gentle hill that ended in a small valley covered in golden grass. I laughed. "Ah, you have no idea what my aunt here was capable of when she was your age." We ran, the wind whipping my face. Chloe laughed as she passed me. I felt a childlike euphoria, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. But stepping on a loose rock, my foot turned strangely and gravity did the rest. I tried to balance myself, but my body was thrown forward. It was too quick to react. The blow to the head was a dull impact, and the entire world seemed to go blank. There was no pain at the moment, just absolute silence. It was as if nature itself had paused. From somewhere above, I heard Emilia scream, "Marlo, no. Chloe, stay there." Her voice sounded muffled, as if it were coming from underwater. My body was motionless on the floor, but there was something strange. I felt light, loose, as if I was no longer limited to flesh and bones. That's when I realized I was looking at myself. My body was there, inert, and I was floating above it. The moment I realized that I was looking at my body lying on the floor, a mixture of confusion and terror came over me. This can't be happening, I thought. It was like I was trapped in a dream, but everything felt terrifyingly real. The wind was still blowing through the trees, and I could hear Emilia's voice calling my name, but it was as if it were far away, in another dimension. Floating a few feet above, I had a clear view of the scene. Chloe stood there, petrified, with her hands covering her mouth. Emilia was running towards me, her quick steps crunching dry leaves under her feet. The desperation on her face was visible, but I couldn't feel the panic I normally would. There was a strange calm inside me, a disconnection that didn't make sense. "Is this real?" I murmured to no one in particular. My voice sounded strange, almost like an echo. I looked at my hands, or what I thought were my hands. They were translucent, appearing to be made of pale light, but still recognizable. There was no weight, just a feeling of lightness that was both liberating and disconcerting. As I watched, I saw Emilia kneel beside my body, shaking me gently. "Marlo, wake up. Please wake up." Her tone broke my heart. Chloe began to cry softly, and Emilia hugged her with one hand, trying to calm her down while calling for help on the phone with the other. "I'm here," I tried to say, but my voice wouldn't come out. It was like screaming in a dream, unable to be heard. I tried to get closer to them, but as soon as I thought about moving, an invisible force began to pull my being away. It was gentle at first, like a stream of water, but it grew stronger, impossible to resist. I looked back as I was dragged away. The sight of my receding body filled me with a strange mix of curiosity and terror. Emilia now pressed a coat against my head, trying to stop the blood that was flowing from a visible wound. Chloe sobbed in her arms, repeating softly, "She's going to be okay, right? Is she going to be okay?" Before I could react, the environment around me began to disappear. It was as if the physical world was dissolving, giving way to a deep, infinite darkness. I felt the speed increase as I was pulled into this darkness, as if I was being sucked into a vortex. The initial fear gave way to something unexpected, a feeling of peace. Then, on the horizon of this darkness, a golden light began to emerge, small at first, but growing every second. The light had a quality I had never experienced before. It was warm, welcoming, and alive. Something inside me knew that this light was more than a phenomenon. She was the essence of love. As the golden light grew on the horizon, the darkness around me began to dissipate. It was as if that light was dissolving all the fear and doubts I felt, filling the void with something I couldn't define. It wasn't just heat, it was pure love, as if every part of my being was being embraced and welcomed. The speed at which I moved increased, and suddenly, I was enveloped by light. It wasn't blinding, but it seemed to penetrate every part of me, revealing secrets hidden even from myself. It was as if that light knew me deeply, every thought, every emotion, every mistake, and yet, it accepted me completely. A voice appeared, soft, but full of authority and affection. It was no ordinary voice. It was as if it resonated directly within me, speaking to my soul. "Marlo," the voice said, and in that moment, I knew who it was. I didn't need to ask. I didn't need explanations. I was before Jesus. The light began to condense, taking on a human shape. He was in front of me, and his eyes were the most extraordinary thing I had ever seen. They were deep, as if they contained the entire universe, but at the same time, full of tenderness and compassion. He smiled, and in that smile there was a peace that words could never describe. "Marlo," he said again, pronouncing my name in a way that sounded ancient, almost Aramaic, but which I understood perfectly. "You have questions, and today you will have answers." I wanted to speak. I wanted to ask so many things, but words seemed unnecessary. He already knew everything. Still, one question escaped. Why me? Why am I here? Jesus stepped forward, and the light around him pulsed softly. "Because you needed to remember who you are and what love really means." He reached out his hand, and as he touched it, a wave of emotions went through me. I felt the purest love I had ever experienced, a love that didn't judge, that didn't demand anything in return. It was a love that simply existed. I fell to my knees before him, not out of obligation, but out of a natural reverence that seemed inevitable. He leaned over and placed his hand on my head, as if blessing me. "You will see things that will change your outlook on everything. But remember, love is always the purpose. Even in darkness, love guides." Upon saying this, the environment around us began to change. The golden light turned into a different scene, something I wasn't prepared to see. It was a hill, and on top of it, a cross. The world around me turned into a dark and heavy landscape. I was standing on a barren hill, and the atmosphere seemed filled with pain. The sky, once golden and bright, was now gray, with dense clouds that seemed to swallow the horizon. At the top of that hill, a cross was stuck in the ground, and on it was someone I knew to be Jesus. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of the wind carrying a murmur of voices. I felt small, almost insignificant, in front of that scene. I tried to move, but my body felt heavy, like I was carrying the weight of the pain around me. When I looked at Jesus on the cross, my eyes filled with tears. His suffering was palpable, but there was something deeper in his gaze, something I couldn't immediately understand. His hands were pierced, blood slowly oozing out, while his head hung with the crown of thorns pressing into his skin. Every detail seemed so vivid, so real, that it was impossible to look away. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice shaking with the mix of pain and confusion. I didn't expect an answer, but he slowly lifted his head and looked directly at me. Even on the cross, his eyes were full of love and compassion. "Because true love demands sacrifice, Marlo," he said, his voice echoing inside me. "The suffering you see is not the end. It is a path, but love will always be the destination." I fell to my knees, unable to bear the intensity of that moment. The pain I felt as I witnessed this seemed unbearable, but it was also accompanied by a peace that was difficult to explain. It was as if suffering and love coexisted in perfect harmony. As I watched, the scene began to change. The cross was still there, but the pain seemed to slowly dissolve, replaced by a golden light emanating from Jesus' own body. "You asked if I still feel this pain," he said, as if he knew what was in my heart. "I don't feel it. Because love transformed everything. Around the hill, shadows began to dissipate, revealing faces, men, women, children, all looking at the cross with expressions of repentance and gratitude. That's the power of love, he explained, transforming pain into redemption, darkness into light. Suddenly, the cross disappeared, and the scenery began to fade away, giving way to a new vision. It was something entirely different, a glimpse of the future. I knew I was about to see something that would change my perspective forever. As soon as the cross disappeared, I was surrounded by a whirlwind of images and sounds that seemed to come from all directions. The golden light was still there, but now it acted like a living screen, projecting scenes I didn't immediately understand. It was as if I were watching a movie, but feeling every emotion, every impact of the events unfolding before me. The first image that emerged was the inauguration of a man I immediately recognized, Donald Trump. He was on a stage, with crowds of people around him. The scene seemed chaotic, almost as if there was a heavy energy hanging over everything. When I looked at Jesus next to me, he looked serious but calm. "This moment will mark the beginning of a great watershed," he said. "Humanity will face a period of intense turbulence." The views changed quickly, as if someone was accelerating a sequence of events. I saw protests in crowded streets, people shouting and holding signs. I saw world leaders arguing at conference tables, while explosions occurred in distant places. The world felt divided, as if it was about to fall apart. "Why?" I asked, my voice choked with emotion. "Why allow all this to happen?" Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder, and I immediately felt an inexplicable calm. Chaos is an opportunity to awaken. Often, humanity must face darkness to find light. More scenes flashed before me. I saw devastating natural disasters, earthquakes, floods, forest fires that consumed entire cities. But amidst all this, something unexpected began to emerge. I saw people coming together in small communities, helping each other with genuine love. I saw prayers being said in different languages, uniting cultures and beliefs. It was as if, amidst the chaos, a spiritual rebirth was beginning to take shape. "Love will be the answer," Jesus continued. "Those who choose forgiveness, compassion, and unity will lead this transformation." There was a moment of silence, and then the light showed something that left me speechless. I saw churches falling, but not into destruction. They were dissolving, as if freed from their walls. Then I saw crowds worshiping God in open spaces, free from dogma, connected only by the Holy Spirit. As the visions began to slow down, I looked at Jesus with a mixture of wonder and concern. "The future is not set, Marlo," he said. "It is shaped by the choices of every human heart. What you have seen is a possibility, but the power of love can transform even the darkest paths." The last vision I was shown was of children playing in a golden field, without fear, without pain. It was a glimmer of hope, a reminder that love always wins, even in the most difficult circumstances. With a steady, loving gaze, Jesus concluded, "Your mission is to share this, to teach people to love, forgive, and believe in the light, even in the darkest of times." When the images disappeared, I felt a deep sense of responsibility and a new strength within me. "I'm ready," I said quietly, even though I wasn't sure what that meant. As soon as the visions of the future disappeared, I felt the environment around me change again. There were no more earthly landscapes or crowds. Now, I was floating in what felt like outer space. Stars shone in every direction, some pulsing with vivid lights and colors I could never imagine. Vast nebulae stretched out like the brush strokes of a cosmic artist, vibrating with an almost tangible energy. It was breathtaking. "Welcome to the heart of creation," said Jesus, as he appeared at my side. He didn't look like an ordinary man now. His light radiated with greater intensity, almost as if he were an extension of the cosmos itself. I looked at him, amazed. "Oh, it's beautiful. But what is this place?" Jesus stretched out his arm, and as he did so, a small nebula nearby began to shine even brighter. "You are at the heart of divine creation. Every star, every planet, every speck of light you see was made with love. Everything is interconnected, Marlo. Nothing exists separately." As he spoke, my mind seemed to expand, understanding truths that words could not express. He gestured to a small floating asteroid nearby, and suddenly, we were sitting on it. All around, A vast expanse of stars sparkled like diamonds scattered across the dark veil of the universe. "Why did you bring me here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jesus looked at me tenderly, his light pulsing gently. "Because you need to understand how vast God's love is. It is not limited to one religion, one belief, or even one planet. Everything that exists, in every corner of this universe, was made out of love." He then pointed to a star that seemed far away, but which, at his command, came closer, as if obeying his will. In it, I saw glimpses of other worlds, with life forms that I could not fully understand. "You are not alone in this universe, Marlo. There is life beyond your understanding, and yet the love that sustains humanity also sustains them." I felt small, but not insignificant. It was as if my existence was connected to everything. As I tried to absorb what I was seeing, Jesus placed a hand on my shoulder. "Your mission is not to understand everything, but to bear witness. Share the truth that love is universal, and that creation is a reflection of this." Suddenly, the asteroid began to move, taking us among the stars. We passed galaxies that seemed to dance in harmony, showing me the perfection of the universe. There was a purpose in everything, even in the most chaotic places. "But how can I convince people of this?" I asked, almost fearing the responsibility. He smiled. "You don't need convincing. Just live in love, Marlo. Your life will be the test." As his words echoed inside me, I felt the scenery around us begin to change again. Space vanished, and a feeling of heaviness began to return to my being. The vast and brilliant space around me began to transform. The starlight dimmed, and a feeling of weightlessness that had once enveloped me began to dissipate. I realized that something was changing, that I was being taken back to the place where it all began. Jesus was still at my side, but now his expression was more serious, yet still filled with love. "You have come to the moment of choice, Marlo," he said, his voice echoing like a soft chant in the back of my mind. I stared at him, confused. "Choose? Choose what?" He extended his hand, and suddenly I was transported to a golden field that seemed to have no end. The air was sweet and light, and the colors around me had an intensity that didn't exist on Earth. Children ran and played, their laughter filling the room with pure joy. Adults were gathered in circles, talking and smiling as if they were old friends who had finally met again. It was a place of absolute peace, where time seemed irrelevant. "This is the kingdom where you can remain if you choose not to return," Jesus explained as we walked through the countryside. "Here, you will be in eternal harmony, surrounded by love and free from suffering." The invitation was tempting, almost irresistible. Every fiber of my being wanted to stay in that perfect place. But then Jesus raised his other hand, and a new vision appeared. I saw my family gathered in a hospital, their faces marked by exhaustion and sadness. Emilia was holding my limp body's hand, while Chloe cried softly beside her. "If you return, Marlo," said Jesus, "it will not be easy. Many will not believe what you have seen. You will face doubt, rejection, and challenges. But your mission is not to convince, but to share. What you learn here can change lives, if you are willing to take this truth to the world." I felt torn, like my heart was being pulled in two directions. "But what if I fail?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What if no one hears me?" Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder and smiled. "You will not be measured by the result, but by the love with which you live your mission. That's what matters." I looked at the golden field one last time. The peace I felt there was indescribable, but the image of Chloe and Emilia never left my mind. I knew what I needed to do. "I choose to return," I whispered, tears in my eyes. Jesus looked at me with pride and gently placed his hands on my shoulders. "Then go and take the light with you." He pushed me gently, and the feeling of falling took over my being. The field disappeared, and suddenly, I felt the weight of my body again. The sensation of falling was abrupt and terrifying. The lightness I had experienced disappeared, replaced by the crushing weight of my physical body. It was as if I was being forced into a space too tight to contain everything I had felt and learned. The pain returned immediately, a throbbing pulse in my head that seemed to echo throughout my being. I opened my eyes with effort, blinking against the cold white light that illuminated the room. The sound of machines and the rustle of hospital gowns began to fill my consciousness. I heard familiar voices, distant but recognizable. The first was Emilia, my sister. Marlo? The word came out shakily, filled with hope and fear at the same time. I felt his hand squeeze mine, and the warmth of his touch was the first thing that truly anchored me back to reality. I tried to respond, but my mouth felt dry, as if I hadn't spoken in years. Emilia, I whispered, my voice so low I could barely hear myself. But that was enough. She began to cry, tears flowing silently as she pressed my hand to her face. Marlo, you're back, she said, her voice cracking with emotion. You scared us so much. We thought we lost you. I wanted to reassure her, to tell her she was okay, but the weight of the experience she had just experienced was almost unbearable. It wasn't just my body that was exhausted. My soul seemed to carry an immense burden, the weight of the revelations I knew I needed to share. A few seconds later, I heard another voice, a firmer but still full of emotion. Welcome back, Marlo. It was Dr. Nathaniel Reed, the neurologist responsible for my case. He had a serious expression, but his eyes showed relief. You suffered a severe brain injury, but it appears we were able to stabilize you. It's a miracle you're here. Miracle, I murmured, almost laughing ironically. If you only knew what I saw. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed, as if he was trying to interpret my words. You're confused, and that's normal. Brain injuries can cause intense hallucinations. But let's give it time, okay? I wanted to explain that what I experienced was not a hallucination. But before he could respond, Emilia interrupted. Not now, doctor. Let's let Marlo rest. Rest. It was impossible. I closed my eyes, but the images of what I saw, of Jesus, of the future, of that golden field, were engraved in my mind. I knew no one would believe me, but I also knew I had a mission. The love I felt, the lessons I received, all of that needed to be shared. I looked at Emilia. I need to tell you something you won't believe. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. My physical recovery was slow and painful. Constant headaches, dizziness, and a weakness that made even the simplest tasks feel exhausting. However, the greatest weight was not on my body, but on my soul. The experience I had in the Blue Ridge Mountains was constantly on my mind, crying out to be shared. I tried to tell Emilia at the first opportunity. We were in the hospital room, and the morning sun illuminated the room with a soft light. She was sitting next to me, holding a cup of coffee, her eyes tired but full of concern. Emilia, I began, my voice hesitant. I need to tell you what happened while I was gone. She frowned, placing the cup on the table. Outside? Marlo, you've been in a serious accident. Your brain has been under a lot of stress. It's natural that you've had strange dreams or hallucinations. It wasn't a dream, I insisted, feeling the urgency rising within me. I came out of my body. I saw everything from above. I was taken through a tunnel. I met Jesus. He showed me incredible things about the future. I can't just ignore that. Emilia's expression changed from concern to something that looked like skepticism mixed with discomfort. Marlo, you hit your head really hard. Brain injuries can cause intense experiences. Dr. Reed explained this. It could be your brain trying to make sense of the trauma. Do you think I'm making this up? My voice was louder now, and the frustration was boiling over. I saw things that no one could invent. I felt a love that doesn't exist in this world. Do you think it's just my brain? Emilia? I saw the future, she sighed, running a hand through her hair. I don't know, Marlo. Maybe you believe this happened, but it's hard for me to accept. I just want you to be okay. The lump in my throat made it impossible to continue. Emilia's reaction was just the first of many. When I tried to talk about my experience with Dr. Reed, he was even more blunt, dismissing it as vivid hallucinations common in near-death situations. Even friends and acquaintances, when they heard parts of my story, would smile awkwardly or change the subject. It was devastating at first. I felt isolated, as if the most important thing that had ever happened to me was incomprehensible to the world. But, little by little, I began to understand something Jesus had told me. Your mission is not to convince, it is to share. I decided it didn't matter if people believed it or not. My purpose was to plant a seed, to talk about the love, forgiveness, and unity I saw and felt. I started writing down all the visions and lessons I received in a notebook. It was as if the words flowed through me, a constant reminder that my mission was still just beginning. My release from the hospital came with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. Being back in the real world felt strange, almost suffocating. The sound of traffic, everyday conversations, the routine of life, everything seemed insignificant compared to what I had experienced. However, I knew I needed to move on, not to resume life as before, but to live according to the purpose Jesus had set before me. Upon arriving home, reality hit hard. Emilia, although caring, remained skeptical, and I knew she was worried about me. "You need to rest, Marlo," she would say whenever she saw me writing in my notebook, trying to record every detail of my experience. "If you focus too much on it, you can get lost." I smiled and thanked him for his concern, but I knew I couldn't ignore the calling I felt. I started looking for ways to share my story, even if it meant facing judgment and disbelief from others. I spoke to local pastors, but most listened politely and then dismissed me, suggesting that perhaps my experience was a metaphor for faith. That didn't discourage me. I knew there were people who needed to listen. The first time I told my story publicly was in a small spiritual support group that met at a community library. I was nervous. My hands were shaking as I held the notes. But as I began to speak, I felt a peace that seemed to come from outside of me. I told him about the tunnel, the golden light, the encounter with Jesus, and the visions he shared. When he finished, there was a long silence. I thought no one believed me, but then a woman in the back of the room raised her hand. "I had an experience like that too," she said, with tears in her eyes. "I never told anyone because I thought they would think I was crazy." Those words left a deep impression on me. I realized that even if few believed, there would always be people who needed to listen to find the courage to share their own experiences. It was at that moment that I decided that my mission was not about convincing the masses, but about reaching every heart that was open to listening. I started writing a book, narrating every detail of my journey. Little by little, small groups of people began to gather to hear my story. Some came looking for answers, others simply out of curiosity, but many left transformed. Today, looking back, I understand that my experience was not a fluke. She was a call to live in a truer, more loving way. It doesn't matter if everyone believes my story. What matters is that I live it, share it, and plant seeds of love and hope wherever I go. If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.